Welcome to the Unbound Woman podcast. I'm Niamh, feminine embodiment and nervous system coach, and this is where we stop romanticizing burnout, stop hiding behind healing, and start living regulated, turned on, and fully expressed lives. We talk safety, desire, power, and what it actually takes to feel turned on by your life, not just functioning inside of it. If you're ready to soften without collapsing and leading without hardening, let's jump right in. Hello, all, and welcome back to the Unbound Woman podcast. If you're new here, welcome. I know I have a few new listeners over the last few weeks based on just how I've been doing things and changing things up. So I'm excited to have you here. And apologies if the sound is a little off. I have my AirPods in because my microphones aren't charged. I need to just get a new microphone for all that is the world of love that I have for my husband. Apparently, when he needs to be in a call, everyone and their mother on earth have to hear it. He has no indoor voice, unfortunately. And it doesn't make it any better when he has headphones on. So we're just going to roll with it. Hopefully, I'll be able to block out the background noise, but here we are. And as you can see, I don't look like I was prepared for a podcast episode today. I actually wasn't. I have been a little overwhelmed, if I'm very honest with you. The last few weeks up until my birthday has been interesting. I caught myself in another pattern, which is wonderful because we want to shed that ship before the 17th of February. And basically, it was just like this last time self-sabotage, feeling overwhelmed, getting out of routine, letting go of the structure that I had in place. And what happens is this is how I feel. I haven't felt like this in a long time because I haven't let go of my structure and my routine. What I'm finding really interesting is like it all came up just around my birthday, which was last week. And that's one of the reasons for this podcast today. I want to talk about, I know I've spoken about like my last year and stuff like that, but I want to actually talk about like the 10 lessons that I learned as a 33-year-old woman. So 33 is a divine feminine number. It is a very potent number astrologically. And for women, it's a specific and special year. And for me, I very much found myself in my Villan era this year. And that doesn't mean I was outwardly being a dick or outwardly being a villain like you would see online or anything, but more of like how I know I was being portrayed by people because I was choosing me. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't choose me from this like spiritual space of like, I'm just not engaging with that. Like I actually started to fully choose myself and not engage with certain things. And I wanted to go through those lessons. So there's about 10 of them. And we're just going to briefly go through what I learned because it's important that we reflect on our years. And I know I've spoken about that over the last few podcasts, and the same in Reclaim if you joined, which is now going to be a private podcast. So if you're already listening to this, it'll be released from the 28th of February. So keep your eyes out because it's a new mini course for your know, like, and trust. But it's going to be there available for you to just access. Your cadence will be over 14 days and you have a whole load of juicy bonuses as well. But even in that, this idea of like really reflecting on how far you've come is really important because as I've said before, the nervous system needs to see things. It needs to almost have it proven. It's like a maths equation, right? For us to know that it's happened, we have to be able to see the results, but we also have to see where we've come from. And I love my birthday. I'm a really big fan of my birthday. And I always use it as an opportunity to review myself again, even after the new year. I know also I'm lucky because my birthday's that little bit closer to like the spring, the change that we all have coming in. So, it kind of always aligns really well for me. And I do take the last few months of the year, including my birthday, to like really refresh myself. And then I reflect a few times a year. Like I don't spend every month doing it, but I really do try like every quarter to like remind myself of my goals, remind myself of my vision, remind myself of what is working for me and what do I need to fine tune. And I really felt this January was very much about that. Like it was showing me where I was either half-assing it or not fully attuning with it. So yeah, it's been really, really interesting for me. So I've written a few notes because I'll forget with my little brain that it's like at the moment. But we're going to start off with lesson one. One of the really big lessons I learned this year is that you will be the villain in someone else's story, no matter how kind or intentional you are. And this came up a lot for me in various different ways. It came up in friendships and family relationships. It came up in like past relationships. It came up for me even in the really close friendships that I have, because I would have always had a massive fear of rejection. And that's where my people pleasing stemmed from. But I very much had to get really, really honest with myself and be like, but is that for me? Like, is it my problem if they're going to see me as the villain? No, there's there's a difference, and this is the difference I had to learn. There's a difference between being a dick and being like, oh well, I'm just going to be the villain anyway, and then there's the difference between actually doing something in a very kind and transparent way by holding your boundary and still being seen as the villain, because that is their projection and that is their responsibility to manage. Because if you're in friendships with people or relationships with people who just want to project out onto you and don't want to see where they have gone wrong, that's not a you problem. You can't force them to do that work because they will just become defensive with it at all points. And this came up so often for me, and it was very much a very big thing for me because of what was coming up for me last year, like with the wedding and like a very big transition in my life and all the other bits and pieces. It just felt like, oh my God, like I just don't want to have this shit going on. And to be honest, what I realized was the longer I continued to people please and the longer I continued to try and make sure that I wasn't the villain, I was wasting more and more energy. I don't want to say letting them win because it's not a game, but it was more like I was giving over energy that just wasn't worth it. It didn't belong to them. And to be quite honest, I had better things to think about. So that was a really big wake up call for me of like, I was aware of it, but I never really felt okay in it because my nervous system couldn't hold the rejection. And I just had to become very clear in who I was in all of it. That brings me on to the second lesson, which was letting people pull you down with them is an actual choice. And this was a huge one because it came up twice, maybe close to three times last year, three different events on where I could see two different aspects of my old life and my new life coming together and watching how one part acted and showed up and that wasn't aligned with me anymore, and how the new version of me is willing to show up and align. And what I have called into my life in so many different ways. And this is to do with work, it's to do with people, it's to do with showing up for myself, it's to do with business. And I was just like, I watched it unfold in front of me. And I so quickly realized, because again, with my people pleasing tendencies, I want to go fix things because I think, oh, I hate this, or, I need to do something about it. But actually, again, that was just keeping me in that energy. So instead, I just stepped out of it. And I was like, actually, again, this is not mine. If you have big feelings about things and you're making it all about you, particularly on an occasion that's mine or that isn't actually about you and is about somebody else, like that's not my issue. And really watching how people only want you to be happy when they're happy or only want you to be a certain way. And when you step out of that and how you, in quotations, disappoint them, that is all to do with their reaction, how they feel about themselves. And me trying to fix that was only going to make me miserable because, to be honest with you, that's just not how I wanted to show up in that moment. And these dynamics really cost you your integrity and your authenticity and your energy, no matter what form of dynamic it is in. And it's like, if you're not actually fully happy in that, like you can choose to step away. And I made a lot of choices last year And I was confronted with a lot of my boundaries being overstepped and really me having to learn to like stick to them. And this very much happened in one of the jobs that I had taken before I got this corporate role, where like that person was just so toxic and treated people a certain way and felt a certain way about the world and expected people to just fall in line and agree, that when I would show up and be like, "But I actually don't agree with that," it became an issue. And I realized very quickly that that's just who they are. And they want everybody down in the dirt with them. And I don't want to be there. And I stepped out of it. And it was really hard for me because I hate letting people down. I hate feeling like I've disappointed somebody. And that's something I've just really had to learn to be okay with. Um, Rather than getting in there and just making them feel better by making myself feel miserable. Um, so that was a really, really important lesson for me because I spent so much of my life trying not to feel that way in fear of being rejected. And actually, now that I've stepped out, I'm like, oh my God, my life is so much more peaceful. One of the third lessons I did was from stepping back from my business, it taught me that my worth is not dependent on my productivity. And rest never made me irrelevant. It made me a lot more clear, or it made me clearer, for want of a better word. And what I mean by this, and for anybody who maybe doesn't have a business, when you're doing the self development work and productivity is such a big thing. And I am a very productive human, right? And not out of force, out of actual want. I love doing things. And when I'm aligned with it, I'm in. And sure, there are times where like I self sabotage and I fall off the wagon. But overall, I actually do like being somewhat productive. And not because it's a checklist of like, oh, now I've earned my rest and I've earned the money I'm charging. No, no, no. I actually just like being productive. I'm a generator. I have a lot of sacral energy. But I also know that for so many of us, particularly if you're trying to run a business or you're trying to do really well in a career or anything like that, when you feel like you can only get the raise because you've done a million things and you've burnt yourself out, or that you are showing up online every day, but it's not going anywhere. What stepping back from my business allowed me to do was allow me to go, right, how do I actually want to feel? What do I want to feel about my business? How do I want to feel in life? And how do I want to feel about showing up? And when I really leaned into that, what I figured out for myself was that I was exhausted trying to keep ahead of the curve. I was exhausted trying to think of like the next post, the next thing to talk about, to make sure I didn't say too much and I didn't say the wrong thing and that I got people into my courses. And when I came to terms with that, and I was like, that's even just the sounding of it sounds exhausting to me. I knew that something within the business, if it was to come back, was going to have to change. And it had to be done from a space of this is what makes me happy and this is how much I enjoy giving. And that comes down to 4 podcasts a month. I send out 4 mailing lists a month. I post on Instagram. I try to post often, but as and when I feel. I love being on camera, oddly enough. Um, I love speaking to people. I love doing master classes. I love teaching using my voice rather than pictures, even though I still do a lot of carousels. And the other piece was like, I also want to make it really easy on myself because I do work a full time job. I do have a relationship. I have health and fitness goals. I have a social life. And while, some people like you need to hustle at the beginning, I don't doubt that. But I also do know that I don't have to burn myself out doing it. And I get to do something that actually feels really good to me. And those people who want to know, like, and trust have followed my journey for years. So it was like, if I just put down the tools for a while and let myself rest and really just align with my energy, because also I'm in a place of safety right now where I don't need the money to keep me going. So everything I get to do is from a place of joy and from a place of like, this is what I want to bring to the world. And that gave me a lot clearer of a vision. And I feel like for a lot of business women, we get so disheartened by the fact that we have to think of content that we actually forget about our original message, which is what we want to bring to the table. And how can you make that simpler for yourself? Because what I do find with a lot of women that I work with is that they'll go to me, well, I'm just so overwhelmed the moment I think of a post because I'm trying to think of posts. And I'm like, why is it multiple? Why aren't you taking 15 minutes to think of a post? Why don't you, if you're using AI, which I don't always use, I use it actually just to more format and grammatically correct me because the English is not my forte. Um, but what if you sat down and you wrote 10 ideas for the month of what you would like to speak about and make one content piece a month? And then maybe looked at posting it to Pinterest and maybe looked at posting it to LinkedIn. Like, we get to make this easy for ourselves. And sure, you're not going to see massive traction straight away, but you are going to see something. And I think that's the really important piece that a lot of women forget about. So, like, step back for a moment and come back to the original message. Come back to what actually feels good and actually doable for you, rather than being like, I have to start a million things. So yeah, so that was one of my really big lessons last year. I think that was one of my most potent lessons. The next lesson, however, was definitely one for the books. And I am going to do a podcast episode on this actually. I don't know if I'll bring him in for it, but I'll see if he's up for it. But surrendering control last year, and when people use surrender, and again, I spoke about this in Reclaim actually, when people say surrender, you're like, what the does surrender mean? Like, what the hell does any of that mean to me? And what I find is like people get so hung up on the word. It's about how it feels. So, like, what does surrender actually feel like to you? So, for me, surrender feels like if my husband comes in to give me a hug right now, or even if he sat on the floor, sometimes he does this where he'll sit on the floor and he'll ask me to sit between his legs and I'll lean back and he just allows me to melt into him. Like, I just feel my whole body relax. It's like, oh my God, it's like the biggest exhale. That's how surrendering feels for me. And this year, um, Liam came out of work for a few months. And while he had time, he very much took the forefront of our wedding. He very much stood up and was like, I'm going to organize this. And not from the point of like controlling. Like, I did a lot of the creative stuff, the invites, all those bits and pieces, all the fun stuff, all the creative girly stuff. But like the nitty gritty stuff of like emailing, keeping track of things, making sure payments went out, making sure things were done, making sure the wedding planner knew about stuff. He was actually better than a wedding planner. I don't know why we bothered to pay for a wedding planner. But like, that was he did all of that. He kept tabs on the budget. He knew what was going out, when, what we had paid for, what we hadn't paid for, what did we need money for on the day. Like, that was Liam's gig. And what I found very, very interesting for myself was during this time, and I still some days struggle with it, particularly when I talk about it to other women, because most women I say to are like, oh my God, no way. Like, I can't believe that. Like, fuck. Like, that's awesome. I wish my lad didn't even know where he was going on the day. Like, couldn't tell people. And for me, I used to be a really big organizer. It's who I was, it's who I used to show up as. And I really, truly enjoyed it. However, I used to control from a space of like, I have to be in control because nobody else will do it. And I can't trust anybody else to do it. And over the years being with Liam, this is obviously dissolved because he doesn't, it's not that he doesn't allow me to have control, but like, he's very big on like, give it to me. I'll take it. I'll do it. I'll look after it. And when it came to the wedding, I feel like there's such a massive, what would I call it? Like there's a massive pressure on women specifically to make it perfect. There's a specific one of like making sure that we've done it all. And like this bridezilla thing almost becomes glorified, even though we slag it off all the time. And I felt like for me, I was letting myself down by not planning my wedding. Now, it was my dream wedding. And to be honest with you, it's not that I never actually dreamt of my wedding as a little girl. My preferences chop and change. And actually, the dress I wore was something I remember a vision of like drawing something out when I was little, and it was very much like that. But the overall aspect of like what I wanted to do or anything like that, like I really didn't have much of an idea. I just knew I wanted a man that I loved. Um, and what surrendering in this meant to me was like it really showed me where I was still gripping onto control, where I was still holding on to narratives for the sake of it, rather than actually being like, I don't want to do that. Which, to be really honest, I didn't. I very much didn't want to be talking to the wedding planners. I didn't really want to send them emails back and forth. I just wanted to make the decisions and then also like do different bits and pieces. That felt good to me. I loved the creative pieces. I didn't mind looking through things, but I didn't want to have to handle the rest of it. And maybe it was because I was going through burnout. I don't know. But I really had to like sit back with myself and be like, no, no, I actually get to trust in him and also allow myself to just enjoy this time. Like it doesn't have to be stressful. And I can really tell you it wasn't stressful for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would never have changed anything else. And Liam did an absolutely amazing job. And we both did in our contribution to it all. But what it told me was like trusting your partner isn't just being like, oh, I trust him. Like trusting my now husband is like it's a nervous system thing. It's like so nervous system deep. Like I know he's got it. I don't have to think about it. And like I had pushback from people in my life being like, I can't believe you're letting him choose your shoes. Like, what are you doing? And it was the same about my engagement ring because Liam designed my engagement ring. I didn't know. The ring he proposed with is the ring I wear. There was no stand-in ring. Um, because I fell in love with it. And it was like, I couldn't do that. And I had that from a lot of people. Like I couldn't let him do that. Like he wouldn't get it right. And for me, what it really showed me was that, like, why would I be in relationship? Why would I marry somebody that I can't trust knows me to within the depths of my core? And sure, maybe the dress piece, although I think he would have also picked the same dress, if I'm honest with you. I trust him that much. But like people were like, I don't know how you would trust him to do that. I don't know how you would trust him to show up in that way. Um, and it's all down to like, well, if I can't trust somebody that deeply within my nervous system, why am I choosing to spend the rest of my life with them? And for me, it was a no brainer. And it's really telling when you reflect that to people how triggered they get because they know they couldn't surrender in that. Um, which I find really, really interesting. Another piece that came off the back of the wedding was understanding money. So for me, obviously, the power and the money dynamics shifted in our relationship years ago. And Liam has very much been the breadwinner the whole time. And because of the choices I made, I didn't have the availability to pay for things up front. So a lot of the wedding costs at the beginning were covered by him. I'm obviously paying my half now, but it was like this piece of really having to go in myself and like really making choices from a space of like our future now depends on me and him both being aligned financially. And currently my business isn't taking off, so I need to make some changes. And what I have learned over the year of really understanding my money is that like a lot of the spiritual woke idealism is the only way I can put it, or maybe even elitism around finances really fucks with people. And I had started to learn this lesson already. But what I also learned, and people kept coming to me to tell me different stories about different people, which was very interesting. But you can want the abundance and the capacity of money to flow in at any point. But how are you directing that? Because energy needs direction, energy needs focus. And what I was always so afraid of was budgeting. I was like, budgeting is so scarce. Like it's scarcity. Because that's what I was taught. I was taught that that is scarcity. And what I actually have learned specifically over the last 6 months, really very much so, is that my money can be optimized for me, just like anything else in my world. And I don't have to have full control over it, but making certain financial decisions and making decisions based on where I want to be is really, really important in this moment. It's really important in how I show up. It's really important with how I choose to spend and where am I actually leaking energy with money and also my own self, but also where I don't want to ever be back in that position again where I feel that way around money. Um, and sure, like, I have months where my spending's a bit more than others, or, what I have left over is a bit lesser. But it's important that we recognize that for ourselves rather than like being angry or avoiding it and actually being like, okay, I know where I've gone wrong here. Or yes, I need to dip into my savings because I've spent X, Y, and Z. And it's okay to do that, but it's coming from a very advised place. And like for me, money is not spiritual, it's not evil, it's not good, it's not bad. It's a neutral energy because it actually technically really doesn't exist. We've made it up. So the energy we give money is the energy we get back. And what I find with so many women in the space, if we've been told to just spend and it'll come back. Everything you spend, it'll come back. And I'm like, yes, but we believe that it comes back as finances. It doesn't necessarily. The abundance come back in very different ways. And if you're spending money to hope it comes back in just finances, you could end up sorely disappointed because that's not how the energy exchange works with money. And sure, I might buy into a coach who's like 10K, and she may be like, oh my God, like if you invest in me, that money's going to come back to you tenfold. Does it come back in tenfold of cash, or is it coming back in tenfold of the wisdom, the business strategy, her mentorship, like her time, her money? Like, I think we're being very manipulated by what's been spoken. And for me, this was really, really important because it changed my relationship not only to money, but also to power, which I know is a big thing right now because we see money as the issue with the elites and what's going on in the world. And actually, that's just people who are traumatized and have money and don't know what to do with their lives and are engaging in stuff that's quite satanic. But it is such a massive piece of like, how do we show up with money in a very powerful way, in a very embodied way, and empowered? How can we be discerning with our money? And that has been a very big lesson for me. I'm absolutely loving that one. And I'm still learning, particularly with money. There's a lot that goes on there. But yeah, and then another one of the beautiful lessons, which I think I'm on, what? This is my fifth one. I would have spoken about this before. You're all very aware that I'm very big on nervous system work. But it literally changes so much in your life when your nervous system is calm. And while I work with the somatic, while I work with the body, while I do energetic work, I also work with the physical, I also work with the reality, and I also work with the structure. Having nervous system work is so, so powerful because I can't explain to you how different of a scenario I know it would have been if I hadn't done the regulation work and the nervous system safety expansion stuff before my surgery. Because my surgery was supposed to be a month later. I got a phone call, and 24 hours later, I was in there. And I was like, sure, yeah, let's do this. I could have easily freaked out. I hadn't done my full prep that I wanted to. I didn't have everything ready for the few days afterwards. Like I had a whole plan. I had a whole fucking plan. And God was like, absolutely fucking not, sweetheart. We are going to put this nervous system regulation stuff to the fucking test because it's not going to happen that way. And I was like, sure. And I suppose the surrendering piece from earlier in the year probably helped. But it was because I got to such a place where I really trust in myself and trust the work that I've done. And I would never say I'm fully healed, but I do believe that at some point we have got to stop sitting and sifting through the shit and start actually living our lives and expanding our nervous system. That this aspect of myself really came together at that point. Like it was very much like, okay, it's time for me to show up now. I know what I'm doing. I've got this and it's all going to be okay. I didn't panic. We had to go out and we had to get some bits and pieces. I didn't have all the stuff I wanted. And, I always had this visualization of how it was going to go because that was one of the practices I would do every day was like visualizing how I wanted it to go, visualizing. But actually, it was the visualization of the surgery I kept doing. I wasn't doing the whole day, which is fine. Like it is what it is. And I'm kind of glad I didn't. I think for a lot of people, when we put that much emphasis on how every aspect has to go, that when it comes in for us, we're so deep in our own shit. Like, oh my God, it didn't come in that way. It's so different. Oh my God. That we actually forget to be really grateful and re regulate ourselves and be like, But this is the important piece. The fact that you don't have a new tens machine and flight socks and all the other things that you want to have at home, and you don't have 10 cups of bone broth cooked, and you don't have all these meals prepped for yourself. Like, you just gonna have to get over it. Like, if I got to that point, I'm still going to get the surgery. The surgery is the most important piece. Recovery can come. And I had support, I was really lucky in that regard. My husband's amazing. He will always come in and support me. Um, but that's why this nervous system work is so important, because it changes the outcome for you. It changes how you engage with it. It changes how you respond to every given situation. And that was probably one of the biggest ones for me this year, was like actually learning to respond to that and not react to it, which is something, again, that was one of in general, my lessons for the year, like not reacting to people and their shit, but actually responding from my own space and responding from me and being like, nah, it doesn't align. No way. Like, I'm going to respond this way because this feels more aligned. It feels better to me and my body and my safety and my energy. And I'm so grateful that I had done that work for myself over the few years before, that I got to that point where I'm like, I'm not letting this get to me. Like, we're just going to roll with the punches. It's absolutely fine. And sure, like, I'm not perfect in it. Like, the fact that we had to move 2 weeks after the surgery was not what we had planned. We had planned to be moved and then my surgery and then everything. But like, it all aligned for whatever reason. And there was no point freaking out about it. Even when we were moving, like, it was insane. The plan we had just went tits up that day, and it was like, right, we just have to get it done, and it's okay, and life is life. And I had a mini meltdown and we got there. Then moving on from that, another lesson that kind of comes in with that, but then comes in general, which is something I speak about quite often, is like, I hate this narrative that you have to be high vibe to manifest. And I've won several things this year has taught me that I don't need to be in a high vibration to manifest. And I feel like, again, we are done the dirty by stuff online that tells us like, you always have to be high vibe. If you want your manifestations to come in, you have to set yourself up every morning and be high vibe. And I feel like it's a form of emotional gaslighting, which I don't enjoy. What is really interesting in relation to all of that is that when I have honored my feelings, magic has happened. It's the only way I can say it. When I have honored how I feel, and not always necessarily in the moment, it's not always appropriate in the middle of work to take a pillow and start smacking things around because you're feeling rage. Like, at the end of the day, we're adults, okay? We know when we can, when we can deal with these things. But what I mean by that is that when we have our emotions coming up, big or small, we can feel those. You can have a shitty day and still manifest. And actually releasing those emotions, because it gets stuck in the body, is actually more important than feeling high vibe. And it's not about forcing these emotions out so you can move on really quickly. It's about allowing the emotions to be what they are and expressing them in a healthy way for you, and understanding that it's part of the human condition and it's part of being human in this world. And that's not going to stop what's meant for us coming in. And, I, particularly through the end of December and mostly through January, while I had some awesome things happening for me, I wasn't in the greatest of spaces. And I wouldn't say there was something necessarily wrong. There was a lot going on for me. Excuse me. There was a lot going on for me during that time. And I remember just one of the weeks, work was insane. I was trying to keep up with the Joneses. I was thinking of everything and anything. I was working on the business. I had just had counseling. I was just feeling, I wouldn't say down, but there was a lot just happening for me in that moment. And something that I had on my vision board, probably I'd say for the last 2 years. And do you know what? I didn't even purposely not put it on my vision board this year. I just kind of forgot about it. And I was like, oh, it's one of those things. And I was sitting on the couch with Liam. I'd had one of those shitty days. And next minute, an email came in offering me the opportunity for this thing that I've manifested for so long. And I was like, wow. One, detachment is amazing. But two, I wasn't even in a high vibe. I probably hadn't spent most of the week or the last 2 weeks or even 3 weeks fully high vibe. I was still showing up for myself. I was still doing what I needed to, but I wasn't high vibe, I would say, or how people portray it. And it's like, look at what can come in for you, even when you're in this space, because you're honoring how you're feeling and you're not forcing yourself through it. You're just letting it happen. And like, yeah, sure, I picked myself up out of the shit. That's how I continued with my structure. But I've also set up my life that every time I show up, whether it's to send an email, it's to cook myself breakfast, to go to the gym, to go for a walk, to have a restful evening, to have a bath, anytime I set my life up, anytime I do any of those things, I'm manifesting. Want to know why? Because I'm operating from future me. I am like, how would she move through this? Well, she knows she has a whole year ahead of herself. So if she's having a shitty week, just let it be a fucking shitty week and don't judge it. Like, that's where I'm operating from. Like as I said, I kind of had a little bit of self-sabotage come up, and I kind of just said to myself the other day, and I was like, do you know what? This is part of the learning curve. Future me would look at that. She would go, okay, we've caught it now. Let's nip it in the bud. Let's keep going. Let's pick ourselves back up. Let's go. Let's figure out a way to make ourselves move. But also, that's okay. This is life. We're not going to be 100% all of the time. There's days we're not even going to be 10%. But time is an illusion. It doesn't really operate in the way that we think it does. So like, it's just those bits and pieces. So yeah, it's just very interesting when it came to that. But yeah, just try not to suppress yourself and hoping that manifestations will come in because your high vibe is just not working. And I really, really, truly have so much evidence of that over the last year. And I would love for people to understand that about the manifestation space. So, number 7, I know I haven't necessarily numbered them all, but here we are. Unhealed people. Sorry, I'm actually going to have to look at my notes. So, I specifically worded that this way. Unhealed people will experience boundaries, clarity, and growth as a threat. This doesn't make you dangerous. It shows where they are still hurting. And in that, I've experienced a lot of projection from unhealed people or unaware people or those who weren't willing to grow people over the last year. And how I choose to show up in that is, as I said earlier, one of the things is like I'm choosing not to engage. But alongside that, when I witness somebody who is so deeply triggered by how I'm sticking to my guns and how I'm not just operating from a certain space anymore, has been incredibly telling to me about how people truly don't actually want you to be yourself unless they truly love you, right? And they can only love you from the aspect that they're at. But one of the boundaries that I have implemented over the last few years is that a sorry is okay with me, but aligned action means a lot more. And I used to accept apologies constantly, all throughout my life. Anyone did anything wrong. And I was one of those people too. I used to just give apologies. And now I know I tried to change in various ways, but I know my husband will also tell you sometimes I was still just a ball bag. Because to me, saying sorry just got rid of the discomfort. Because if I just said sorry, it stopped. Because that's how it was at home when I was younger. In terms of like the fighting or like the giving out or, the talk of disappointment. And I would just be like, oh, I'm really sorry. And it would stop. Right. But what I also saw throughout my life was like how hollow those sorries were from me, but also from others. And over the last few years, with like watching people treat me in certain ways, or sorry, excuse me, allowing people to treat me in certain ways, and slowly stepping out of things that were happening in my life, what I very much found was that when somebody said they were sorry, do they actually mean it by showing up differently? And one of the things I've had to learn that's a boundary for me is that you can apologize all you want, but if you need this repair to happen, the repair has to be on you. I'm here to meet you halfway and to work on it. But if you just want to say sorry to make things better, because by making things better, it makes you feel a certain way, or like it makes you feel like, oh, I took the higher road, but you're not actually aligning any of your action with it, well, then that sorry means nothing to me. And this boundary has really come in quite clear for me over the last year. Um, and I've lost many friends over it. And I will probably continue to do so because I'm not willing to put myself to detriment ever again and accept apologies that are hollow. And I'm happy to accept the apology when it happens, but I will from there then watch how people show up and how they choose to show up and what story they're telling themselves throughout this process, because that to me is really, really important. And I know I used to talk to my mentors about it all the time, and they were like, actions speak louder than words, which we're taught from a very young age. But when you're taught that words fix everything, you get very triggered about the idea of just sitting back and waiting for somebody to take action rather than just making everything okay. And when you implement that boundary with people, as I said, like watching how they react is so vitally important, because that will tell you so much about them and who they are and their own wounding, right? That's why they're unhealed. It's their own wounding, but you get to choose, as I said earlier, you get to choose how you're going to interact with that and how you choose to react with that. And it's all based on your nervous system and how you're willing to compromise that for yourself. And you don't have to feel guilty over that. I think that's one of the things I've really learned is like, because there is guilt with it, because you've always been the person to make everything better. And particularly when you know these people or you've bear witness to them treating other people certain ways, you know what's happening on the other end. And that can be really, really triggering. But you just have to be very strong in your own conviction and in your own boundary to not overstep it. And I find that really empowering, if I'm honest with you. It's very much changed how I see relationships and how I show up in relationships and where my energy is allowed to be and where it won't be, and who actually deserves my attention and my focus. And that's really, really important. The next one for me is a really big one, and that would be discipline and structure. And for the woman who fought against discipline and structure for so long after the self development work and coming into the spiritual space, and something always felt off about it to me, but I was just like, oh, maybe it'll work for me. Like it seems to work for everybody else. It didn't. It didn't work for anybody. And that's very well known. But for me, it's like actually learning to structure my life and showing up in a very disciplined manner changes absolutely who I am. And what I mean by that is like, I just become a better person. I become a better wife. I become a better friend. I become a better business owner. I become a better leader. I also become a better employee. And the reason is because I don't have a million tabs open in my head all of the time because they're in my laptop. They're in my notifications. There's lists. There's structure implemented into my life. And because of that structure, I get to then lean into my feminine energy in the evenings or 3 or 4 times a week or different ways, because I've aligned and structured myself in such a way. And when I fall out of that structure, which I have done in the last few weeks, and not aligned myself with it, chaos ensues. Like, I mean, we were doing weekly house cleans. I don't think I've cleaned the house in about 2 or 3 weeks. Like, it's tidy, but I mean, like, it needs an actual clean. Like, or, I fucked with my um workout days over the last few weeks, and I'm really struggling to get back into them. And then, like, I find myself going at weird times, and my body's like, what the fuck? Um, Another one of this is like, as I said, I usually have these podcasts recorded like 3 or 4 weeks in advance, and I let it completely run out and have nothing. And that's why I'm sitting here today. Um, there's so much that I have allowed to get out of control because I chose not to show up in the structure. And maybe, as I said, like, it's the last part of the shedding. It's showing up in a way for me to remind me that this is why I do what I do. And this is why I teach women what they do. Because even from the moment that I started putting the structure back in over the last week or so, like, again, the polarity in my relationship, like, just ignited itself. And it's like, oh, I can sit back. And, Liam comes down, he's like, do you want me to make your lunch for you? And like, he always does it anyway. But I don't feel like I have to ask. He's just coming down and he's doing it. Or before he goes out to the gym in the evenings, he's like doing the dinner before he goes so I can eat while he's at the gym and he'll eat after. Like, we operate as a piece together so much better when there is a structure involved, because if not, things do get chaotic because we're both working, we're both running businesses, we're both in a relationship, we're both trying to work out and do all the other things. So, like, when that structure falls away, it's very quick on seeing the destruction that can happen. And there was no destruction between us, but like, I mean, like the chaos that ensues with it. So for me, really understanding that discipline is a part of who I am, and having that discipline really, really helps me to show up in a way that I need to show up to feel good and feel rested and feel aligned, um, and to keep showing up in that way for myself. And that came in a lot throughout the year because anytime I let my discipline drop, all these other bits and pieces came up in my life and I was like, what the fuck? So it's very interesting, and I'm going to sit down this evening and really get myself back into gear. Um Another really big piece that has really only come up recently, again, kind of you could somewhat relay them to the other bits and pieces going on in my life last year. But I have very certain big beliefs and values. I have certain beliefs on things that are going on in the world. I have certain beliefs on how things operate. I have certain beliefs in how we can move forward as a society without destroying each other. And I have certain beliefs as to why we're in the state of the world that we're in. And for so long, as much as I will talk on the podcast about them, I do fear being on Instagram and being visible in that way. One of the lessons I've learned this year is that being misunderstood by people, and actually it was mostly my personal life that really showed me this. And it was one thing my counselor said to me, and I have gone through some of the hardest rejection in life that most people probably will never go through. You know, when you open up a feminine led business to help women, assume those people in your life who really say that they love you will have a different reaction, and having that be rejected on such a level where people won't even talk about your business with you, which is wild because I didn't realize I was perpetuating any form of harm, which I know I'm not. But to them, it's so deeply triggering for what I do. They can't speak about it, that I've literally had some of the hardest rejection ever. And being misunderstood is actually just part of becoming visible. Being misunderstood is actually just part of you becoming who you are. Because if everybody understood you, you're people pleasing somewhere. You're not being authentic. And I know it's really hard nowadays because there's so much out there. People just think they have this right to like attack you when they don't know you. But that's part of becoming visible. And I've had to get really comfortable with that idea because recently I've started to speak out about different things, and I've had interactions on the likes of LinkedIn and Instagram and different bits and pieces where people don't agree with me. Now, I'm very good at being like, that's okay. That's your belief. That's your opinion. I'm not here to convince you otherwise, but just don't attack me for it. You know, I'm very open to just having the conversation with people. But if you're projecting on me, I'm not engaging. Like I really am very much about that now. Like but I cannot build a life of truth and intimacy while also trying to be universally liked. So like if I'm trying to be loved by everybody, I can't be myself, which is what I've spent my whole life doing. And I still got rejected by trying to keep everybody happy. And being myself is the most important piece to me, because if we're going to have kids, I don't want them thinking they have to be somebody different for everybody in the world to like them. And I have to get very comfortable with not liking the fact that most people don't like me, or certain people don't like me, or people are so deeply triggered by me that they'll treat me a certain way. And you have got to get okay with that. And you have to become sound enough within yourself to go, that's just is what it is. And yeah, these have been like really big lessons for me. And I know a lot of them intertwine with each other. I feel like no matter what lesson you learn, that's how it is, because it shows up in every aspect of your life. But for me, it was a lot around visibility, feeling misunderstood, relationships, and people pleasing, and putting in those boundaries and seeing what happens. And you know, when you look back, and I look back on my year, like I'm so grateful for the year. It was really tough at times. I know probably from the outside looking in, you were like, "Oh, her life looks great." It really was hard at times. I really struggled. Um, in various ways. And I was very happy that I had a mentor and some beautiful, supportive friends around me who were able to like show up for me and be like, you're not crazy. Like, I get it. And that is really important. And this year, my intention is to just get in the fucking room. I just want to get in the room, get online. I just want to show up. I want to have beautiful women around. Like, I cannot wait to just bring some of the magic that I'm feeling to the stage effectively. Um, and I know this is going to be a very potent year for me. And I feel like a lot of the work I had to do last year was very much around showing up and understanding myself at such a deep level and being able to stay within my integrity and understanding that just because I'm holding the line or I'm holding my boundaries doesn't make me a bad person. It just makes me incredibly strong and somebody who isn't willing to shrink themselves to make somebody else feel okay. And that's in all aspects of my life. And learning to deeply surrender to help and to the universe, just allowing things to happen as it needs to, as long as I continue to surrender and align myself with what I know works for me. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's more of like, not really like my normal stuff, just as I said, the 10 lessons that I've learned over the last year. And I'm sure I might do another one another time soon. But I really, truly love when you tune in. If this is your first time listening, please, 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 like share this to people, share some of the episodes, put them online, tag me on Instagram. Like, I love seeing it. Send me a review, like anything at all. It's just so helpful because, you know, podcast world can get loud, and any of the ones that can help people is really truly something that is important to me. And getting women and allowing them to feel seen and be like, oh my God, okay, I get what she's saying, like takes it to the next level. So if you could, I would be really, really honored if you could share this, and you know, all the other beautiful pieces that you can do, engage with it. But I will see you all next week and have a beautiful week.